Welcome again to our field days of Connect, Grow and Serve. This is our third session, and as we've been discussing, I'm recording this, so we'll put this up on our YouTube channel that the Presbytery is now established, and we'll also share it on the web page. So there's a field days tab on our Presbytery web page, and you can access all the recordings there. Tonight, so we're jumping ahead. Our two keynotes were Vicky Balabansky, and that's a good session. And it's interesting, Vicky thought that an hour was going to be too long, and we went for 2 hours and had to cut it off. And Deborah Guess, Deborah's been tuning into most of our sessions to get a sense of where we're up to. So I'm really looking forward to her session at the end of the week. And last night, Wendy took us through, and God so loved the world, and thinking theologically about creation, had a wonderful set of resources that were there as well for us to think about how we apply it into our worship and church life. It was great. So, and I welcome Tanya Walker and Tim Angus, who both are involved in community gardens. Tanya at Benalla, and Tim has just been establishing one at Axedale. So yeah, we look forward to talking about faith and community gardens and interactions with community and all that. So I'll pass over to Tanya.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, Tim and I have had a brief conversation about what we would talk about. So I'll start to just share a few things about the Benalla Central Community Garden. So give me a moment to share my screen. There we go. Right, community gardens, bit of a buzzword at the moment, I think. You know, community gardens are popping up all over the place. There's TV shows about them. They seem to be on the top of rooftops in Melbourne and on sidewalks and nature strips and things like that. And so they're sort of everywhere. But yeah, the beginning of the community garden in Benalla started, well, I say that I'm sort of I said this to someone the other day, that I'm the founder of the Benalla Central Community Garden, which is an interesting term, but I suppose I instigated the beginnings of the Benalla Central Community Garden, and that came from some inspiration that I got when I attended a synod meeting, amazingly. So from that, I just felt this real passion to do something more for my church community and to bring about the mission of God outside of the church building a little more. So we started up a committee that would run the community garden, and that consists of both church members and general community members, which is a really great mix. Yeah, so I suppose how I see the community garden on the Benalla Church grounds, and it comes under the umbrella of the Benalla Uniting Church, but it has its own separate committee and sort of runs on its own. And I see it as a similar sort of way of operating as, say, a playgroup would have run on a church property in the past, or even now maybe. So in that same sort of way, under the umbrella of the church. And it was really important to me that it was under the auspices of the Uniting Church to be a project, a missional project of the church. So yeah, so part of that is broadening God's mission into the community. Some good little photos there. And a great colourful sign that we've got. So when I say that I founded it or I instigated it, I say that because it's to inspire you in a way, to inspire you that if you have a vision of something or you have a desire to start something within your church community, go for it. Make that vision happen, because that's all I had. I just had an idea and we made it happen. So, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the people that have got involved with that and have the same desire and the same passion that I have for that. So we started in about 2018, and the community garden has completely run without any actual church funds. In a way, there is church funds in there, but it's from a wider grant system. So we've operated under 2 different grants, and that's managed to establish the entire garden and keep it operating. Once it's operating, there's not that many costs, a few seedlings and potting mix and that sort of thing. So it's sort of self-sufficient already in that respect. So the first working bee that we had a great group of people to set up these fabulous wicking beds, and mix of ages, mix of church people and community people. So already on this very first working bee was this interaction and this connection between church and community. So a really good way to get started. So ecotheology, what does this have to do with ecotheology? Well, what doesn't it have to do with ecotheology, really, is sort of how I see it. So I've got listed there, this in itself is caring for God's creation. It's about sustainability, growing food, composting food scraps, food security, prunings, and the list could go on and on and on. And so it's about that cycle of life going around, and in growing food that can be distributed locally, cuts down on transport of food, that food security sort of thing. Composting just contributes to that whole life cycle, and just it is all about caring for God's creation. And amazingly enough, this week is International Compost Awareness Week, so celebrate that. Had to throw that in. So in linking this to God's mission in the community, in the renewal of the whole of creation out into the community, so that all people have an opportunity to participate in this renewal, not just people, but plants and even the worms have a contribution, that all of this is in a life cycle together and all part of God's creation. When it comes to sharing the faith, that's an interesting aspect to what a community garden is about. And often I think we find it very difficult to make that jump from what we talk about in our church circles to what we might talk about our faith within the community connections that we have. And what better way to make those connections and have those conversations about faith and life than when you are weeding, or when you are constructing a shed, or painting a picnic table, or planting something, or harvesting something. Fantastic opportunities for conversation and for opportunities to share, what's important to you and why you're involved in this, and how God's part in your life makes you involved in this sort of thing. And I've had some amazing conversations in such situations as this down at the community garden. Amazingly, when you're sharing that space together, people open up, and if you're prepared to listen, or you're prepared to share something yourself, then you can have some great conversations. So 2 particular conversations I want to share with you that I think illustrate this. One is someone called Bernadette. She's a similar age to me, 2 kids, a mum, and she's been involved in the community garden. She has experience of some other community gardens that she's been involved in, and so she was really keen to be involved in this one, but her understanding of how community gardens ran came from a different perspective. And so we talked about that. So she had this experience of you to be involved in a community garden, you sort of hire a plot and you grow your own veggies, you harvest your own veggies, and that's your thing. Or often the other concept is that you join as a membership and then you contribute to the garden, and periodically as part of that then you receive a little box of vegetable goodies that are collected from the garden. And so part of my purpose behind this garden was that I wanted it to be open. I didn't want it to be locked away. I wanted it to be open to the community. I wanted it to be a place that people could come and share, to collect what they wanted to for their own purposes, a place that people could connect, and a different sort of community space where people could come and be and belong. And so when I sort of just trying to explain this to Bernadette, she understood that because we had a different concept to the purpose of it, because we were a church, and that she saw it that the church has an outward looking focus, and in having this community garden that's about sharing for the whole of the community, it wasn't about just I'll grow my bit for myself. It was much more communal oriented and looking after each other, looking after the people that actually might need something. She saw that as a real way that the Christians can share love and resources with each other. And it has really proven that actually happens, because through other conversations I've heard that there's single mums that will come along and get a few little bits and pieces to add to their dinner that night. There'll be individuals that live on their own that don't want to go and buy a big huge bunch of silver beet or a big huge bunch of herbs, but can go along and pick little bits and pieces to add to their meals. And in that way there's less waste, but it's also helping them out to be able to contribute to their own meals and the needs that are in the community. And so the other conversation that I've had is with Pip, and Pip is on the committee, and the committee consists of just a few church people, and then majority actually community people who are just passionate about this community garden. And Cal, our minister in Benalla, he's also on the committee. And this meeting that we had one night, quite early on I think it was, we were talking about the purpose of the community garden and what it was all about. And if you know Cal, he's a very down-to-earth sort of guy, and he's very hands-on. He has rocked up at 6 a.m. on a hot summer's day to come and do some weeding in the garden. So he's right there in amongst it, and he just is there and mixes with people and interacts. And Pip, I don't know what her background of the church is, but whatever perspective she's coming from, she said to me afterwards, after this meeting, she said, "That's your minister. That's amazing. If I had have had a minister like that when I was growing up, maybe I would have stayed in the church." So that experience of just being there and getting out there in the community and interacting and having those conversations is just a way that we can share that faith, even if it's just by your experience and your living out of your faith in what you do. So I have some questions, but I think maybe I'll add those in later after Tim's had his little spiel. So I had another photo I forgot to show you. So there's just some lovely produce. Wow. I love the peas.
Good peas.
Aria shelled all those peas.
They're beautiful, beautiful vegetables, Tanya.
Thank you.
They just glow.
So over to you, Tim.
Thank you. Well, I'm in Brian's hands as well, actually.
Right.
So thanks, Brian. So this is Connect, Grow, Serve. That's the kind of thing that is happening this week. And this is about the Axedale Community Garden. And Tanya said that community gardens are everywhere. Well, they've even come to Axedale. So next slide. Brian, thanks. It's you who's moving us on. Now you're muted somehow.
Sorry, Tim. I've just handed control over to you, so you should actually be able to control it now.
Okay, except it's not working.
You need to use the arrows down the bottom. Those.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
So take control back and
I
we'll
shall take
cooperate.
control back. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. There we
So
go.
Axedale Community Garden. Axedale, everybody will know where it is, but I'm not making assumptions. There's a school, a pub, a store, a hall, the CFA, and 2 churches. And this is a rather uncomplimentary photograph of the Uniting Church, little bluestone church. Roof is going to be replaced, but she's no beauty. And last night's conversation, we're aiming at increasing the beauty in the world, I think. So next slide. We're working on the inside. That's what the inside looks like in a rearranged system. So our aim, I think, in the congregation is for beauty and for hospitality, just drawing on yesterday's conversation. Next slide, please. So the genesis, and we're just in our infancy. I can show you some peas, but later on, but I'm cheating because they're from our wicking beds, our garden at home here, because we're nowhere near, we haven't got soil in yet. But the genesis is different. For Tanya's experience, it was the inspiration of the Holy Spirit on you, Tanya, at the Synod meeting, and wanting your desire for the church to grow and to flourish and to engage with its community. In our case, the initiative came from the wider community. A young couple recently moved into Axedale. There is an organisation called Axedale, Our Town, Our Future, that has a Facebook page, and they put a text request in, is anybody interested in starting a community garden? And it happens that some of the congregation members of the Uniting Church in Axedale are members of Axedale, Our Town, Our Future. So there's kind of long-standing engagement in the local community of some of the Uniting Church members, and so there's some trust there. And so there was conversation about this possibility at that little organisation. There's about 12 people part of that Progress Association in Axedale. And as part of the conversation, the church members said, well, the Uniting Church is right in the middle of Axedale, just opposite the school, and we've got land. So we might be able to offer that. So what would you think of the possibility of the community garden being on the church land? Well, that was fine. The other thing that, in terms of kind of long-standing engagement and connecting, as far as the Uniting Church congregation members are concerned, is that Axedale, Our Town, Our Future, has oversight over the local Antics, the Axedale Antics, which is a monthly newsletter that's put out, and the current editors at the Antics are Uniting Church members. So that means that each month there's an update on where we're up to with the garden. And we've established a Facebook page also for the community garden. So the genesis came from not from the church itself, but from an approach from the wider community. Next slide, please. So it's a partnership, and the church offers land, water, insurance. So Axedale is part of a wider cluster of congregations, and the church council is happy to regard the development of the community garden as an activity of the church, even though the initiative came from beyond the church, and it is a partnership, so we're covered under public liability, the church's public liability policy. So we, as the congregation, offer land, water, insurance, enthusiasm. Axedale, Our Town, Our Future, offers oversight and handles the funds. And I think that partnership kind of reduces a bit of what I'd call the threshold factor, the kind of reluctance there is in the wider community to at least even come near the door of the church, let alone cross the threshold. So, partnership. Then we sought a grant from the Fosterville Gold Mine, the local gold mine, and because it's local, because Fosterville's just up the road from Axedale, they were keen to support local community development. And we have also received some quite generous local donations. Thanks, Brian. So here we are. Again, back to the theme of beauty, you can see the nature of the land that we're building on. Axedale is pretty hard country, and the church is basically, that's our little meeting room and morning tea or afternoon tea in our case. And it's a fairly bare block. There's a bit of a garden at the front of the church fronting onto the main street, and some gum trees out the back. It's quite a large block. But it presents as pretty bare, pretty hard. So there we are, measuring up for where things might go. Next slide. And it's COVID times, so hence the masks. And here we are at the first working bee, a few of us. So next slide. There's something, I think, something really lovely about working bees. The sweat and the laughter. It was lovely seeing the photographs of all the colour in the summertime over at Benalla. So our wicking beds are not your corrugated iron style. We're using timber, and there's some cypress timber all the way from Gippsland, supplied by a local Longley person who's in cahoots with a guy down in Gippsland who rescues cypress from farms and saws them up. So we're using cypress planks. But it's the sweat and the laughter, it's working together, and there's kind of a lovely chemistry about that. Next slide. Connect and serve. I've got two wee stories too, Tanya, just to tell. So there we were at our first working bee, beginning to put the wicking beds together to put, and the day before we'd put up that we were going to have this working bee on the Facebook page, and the day before there was an inquiry from somebody, what time is the working bee? I might turn up. So this bloke turned up, we'll call him Kevin, 9 o'clock in the morning, and in about, he introduced himself, we introduced and we kind of explained what we were doing, and he was very happy to be there. And about 2 minutes later, he sidled up to me and said, actually, this is my 20th day of being sober. I've been hitting the grog too hard over the last few years. I'm employed as a such and such, so I've decided to go along to AA and get in touch with my higher power, and this is my 20th day. Well, he's now up to day 75, I think, and keen to put something back into the life of the local community. So, was that serendipity? Was that providence? What's going on there? It's just a lovely connection to build on, hopefully, as the garden gets established, and he and his family might be able to be part of it. He brings to the group the skills of a chef too, so I'm looking forward to perhaps a community meal or two. So that's the first story, totally unexpected, but just a way of rubbing up against somebody in the community. And what blew me away was his trust. And he didn't just share that with me. I just happened to be the one he was working with, and then he shared that with the whole group. I think he was celebrating, in fact, feeling much better, feeling much healthier. The second story, briefly, was that I was down. We built the wicking beds out of the timber, and then they just needed a wee bit more leveling, because it's quite it's nice if the water in the base of the wicking beds is reasonably level. So I was down there on my own, just tidying up a little bit one morning, and one of the neighbours of the church, who I've got to know over a period of time, came across to me, and said, I said what I was doing, but she soon shut me up and said, "Sit down, I need to talk to you." And we sat on the edge of the wicking beds, and she told me the story of what had happened in the life of her wider family, and which included the fact that one of her nephews had taken his own life in New Zealand, and she needed to just share what that meant for her, the role that she was going to play in the life of that wider community as they gathered, as they grieved, as they cared for each other, etc. And that's just, again, just a matter of being present. I didn't have to do anything. I just was told to sit down and shut up and listen. But simply because I was there in the town, in the community, the opportunity presented itself to this neighbour, and she took it. So it's just connecting and serving. And it's just through opportunities to work together, and then the simplicity of happening to be present at that particular critical time. I think there might be one more slide, I'm not sure. So service and hospitality, just to sum up, bare clay and gum leaves, but bringing a bit of growth. We hope to establish a little native garden. We'll put in a fire pit, barbecue plates, pizza oven. Probably 2/3 of the people involved have their own gardens at home and probably don't need the produce for ourselves. So we'll be following the same philosophy as the Benalla community garden, in that there's no fences. People can just come and take what they need if and when they need it. And if there's anything left over that is over and above what people take, it'll go to food share. So that's us in a nutshell. So I didn't prepare any questions, Tanya, so if you've got questions for the group, that would be lovely.
Well, I suppose maybe firstly just open it up to comments or conversation. If anyone had anything to ask or comment on about, both our different community gardens.
Yes, I've got a question.
David, yes?
All right, you hear me?
Yes.
The question is, where in the hell is Axedale?
I know Axedale.
It's beyond the bounds of your presbytery. So it's 20 kilometres east of Bendigo on the Mackayver Highway, halfway between Bendigo and Heathcote, on the Campaspe River. Yeah, a community of about 400 people, but it's growing.
It's got a pub.
It's got a good pub.
Yeah.
Nice golf course.
Two pubs.
And a golf course, Tim. You left out the golf course.
And the golf course. Oh, right. Well, I don't play golf, right?
Neither do I, but I know there's
go
lots to do.
walking around there one day. It's got a few
Uh,
other things as
yeah,
well,
a
but
few ones.
you know, just the
How
essential.
many people are involved? Like
Tanya, you
In
go,
which
Tanya.
church
which
people
one?
to start with?
Sorry?
Oh, both, really? Both.
Both. Well, I suppose if we go sort of broad, for sort of our bigger working bees to set up wicking beds, we probably have about 30 people. We have a committee of about 8-ish, and then it's just who knows. It's a little bit of a broad. You know, I actually see, because I'm down at the church quite a bit, I actually see people coming in and out. Like, it's tucked behind the church, you know, in the car park space behind the church. So it's not actually right on the street. You've got to walk through a space to get to it. And it's becoming more known and more and so people are actually coming to and fro a lot more. As word gets out about it, which is fantastic.
And
Thanks.
for us, we're just in our absolute infancy, and there would have been about 14 people who expressed initial interest. We've had about 12 of adding up everybody at different times who've been there at Working Bees, and of that number, half a dozen of us are part of the little local church. But the local congregation, at best, if we were all there, there would be 12 of us. So it's not a big congregation. So half of us are involved in the community garden.
So, do you involve the community as well or not?
In Axedale?
Mm.
Yes, certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a partnership between the community.
Yeah.
It's a partnership formally, at a formal level, between Axedale, Our Town, Our Future, and the church. And there's no membership qualifications. If you're interested, you're welcome. Yeah.
Mm.
So I have 167 people who currently follow the Facebook page. I don't know what that counts for, but
There's such beautiful vegetables and such beautiful photographs. No wonder they follow.
Any other questions or comments?
I'm just interested in the sense of context and the conversations and how that leads to the conversations, that it's in the proximity of a church, and does that start to invite that sort of conversation, that proximity? You know, I know that ministers, when they play golf or whatever else, as soon as you say you're a minister or whatever, the conversation then often turns to those things. And for often for lay people, it's hard to get, you don't have that conversation because you're not identified as somehow being associated closely with the church. But I think, I'm wondering, with the garden and its proximity suddenly opens up those conversations with other church people, or for church people.
I think when there's other activities going on at the church, that can open up some of those discussions. And so there's an interaction between the people that are catering for a funeral, who will come down and pick some parsley and bits and pieces to add to their sandwiches and whatever, and might meet someone down there, or you know, other things that are happening. And we had, previous to last year's restrictions, we had a community lunch on a Friday morning, and that offered a great Friday lunchtime, offered a great ability to connect, because that was a lunch that was for the community. So there was lots of interesting people from the community who would come along to there. And then many of us would pick vegetables and come and bring it up for the people at the lunch. And there would often be a lot of sort of interaction between, you know, the people preparing the lunch, the people there getting served, and, you know, people doing things in the garden. So there was a real crossover and connection. So I think it does provide opportunities for general church members, because I will start pointing people in the direction of the community garden if they're down there and they see someone. So it is, over time, creating more connections.
Can
I'll
I?
add something which is not a direct answer to your question, I think, Brian, but yeah, for us in Axedale, the little Bluestone Church sits there month after month, and worship is on the first and third Sunday of the month. And apart from that, there's no visible activity of the life of the congregation. So here, in the establishment of the garden, associated with the church, there is something happening, there is something growing. And that at least creates the possibility of some kind of connection being made, who knows what. But there are two examples already for me of connections that have been made.
And I think you, am I on mute? No. But it's accepting that Sunday services aren't sometimes what people want, and they can still, if you can establish a connection doing something else, then that's the first step really in making a connection to God, I guess. Because I'm just recently returned to the church. I used to take my mother, and this is just a small aside, I used to take my mother. That was the reason I went. But when she couldn't go anymore, I wanted to keep going. I just wanted to keep going. And because the people in the church are just such wonderful people, and they have something, they had something that I wanted too. So I think that connection with the community is a chance to, just make that other connection as well.
Yep.
So, and for me, if I'm honest, I'm not necessarily doing it because of what might happen to somebody else. This is my way of getting to know people in my new local community, because I've just retired here to Axedale. So, I get to meet some people that I mightn't otherwise meet.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah. So it enriches me. It enriches me, is what I'm saying.
Well, when you give, you get back 1,000 times over. So, yeah.
Barbara.
Oh, can I ask if your funding is ongoing? Have you become self-sufficient? Or, I mean, you, Tanya, Benalla got some grant from outside the local congregation, and Tim, you've got the Fosterville Gold thing. Is that an ongoing funding, or have you become self-sufficient? Both of you.
Tanya.
Good question. What is self-sufficiency?
Well, you need to draw on funds from continuously.
Well, yeah, most of the time if you're requesting funds from somewhere, it has to be for a specific aspect of the project. So we've recently applied for some funding to set up an outside eating area. So I had to be very specific about what we wanted the funding for. So to say that you want funding to buy seedlings, that's a little challenging. But it's an interesting aspect of it, because I've had people say they would like to donate money when they've been able to collect produce, if they have the means to donate something. Should we have a donation box there? And we've discussed it as a committee, and we've sort of all come to the agreement that we don't want to do that. Partly because if you put a donation box there, there's almost the expectation that you have to donate something in order to get some produce from there, and we want to not have that be the case. It's freely available for anyone who needs it. If you feel like you can contribute in some way, then perhaps people will find a way to do that, or might have some other avenue for donating money if that's the case. Two ladies dropped in one evening while I was down there, and they had a lovely time collecting all sorts of little bits and pieces, and they said, "Can we give you some money for it?" And they both just handed me a handful of coins. So that bought a few punnets of seedlings. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, I suppose.
I think it's a new world too of being, I write grants for a number of organisations, and there are grants around, volunteer grants and, rural grants and this grant and that grant. So you just got to get a bit grant savvy. And a lot of them are not that hard to get. So a lot of them are hard to get, but small ones are generally not. Yeah.
We've actually just applied for, wait for it, a $50,000 grant.
Wow.
So fingers crossed, it's a big project we want to start going. So
Wow.
Can I say a word here? Our community garden at Corowa, we have the community garden is on the tennis courts right next to the church, and we have quite a lot of mainly community people on it who run the garden. We've got over 100 members, and we've got quite a big budget. We've been going since 2015, and most of the members, some of them are members of other churches in town. Only Val and myself are local members of the community garden, but we have quite a bit of church contact with them because it's known as the Corowa Tree of Life Community Garden. And the Tree of Life is the stained glass window in the church, which is just church and hall are together, and the tennis courts and community garden are all together. And so we have a service every December, which I take, which involves members of the community garden who come along, most of them from other churches, but they attend worship. And because it's it's very much a community thing, we have a lot of people, unchurched people there, and they ask, why do you call it the Tree of Life? And of course that opens up all sorts of questions. And we've got we've got a committee of about 15, and in the middle of it, the men's shed have built a pergola, and we have most of our meetings under the pergola, except if it's weather's inclement, we go into the hall. But it's probably one of the more, I think, I'm not boasting here, but people come from all over the place to visit the community garden at Corowa. So if you're interested in community gardens and want to see what we're doing, you're welcome to come across. We've got chooks, we've got a frog pond, we've got mosaics. We've got a lady who does mosaics, and she got a work group up on mosaics, and we've got mosaics all through the garden. We've got a flagpole, and sometimes the Australian flag goes up. We have social community activities every Tuesday and Thursday morning, which people come from all over in the community to come and have a cup of tea or a cuppa, and if they want to pick some produce, then they just help themselves. Most people we find want to put a donation, and we've got a big container with a big slit in it where people can put $1 or a couple of dollars for a donation. So it's very much a community-minded thing. Most of the members are home gardeners, but a lot of them are retired farmers. A lot of them are men's shed people. So everything on the gardens, including all the wicking beds and everything else, is made by the members. So there's no sort of a lot of people coming in and doing things for us. It's all member orientated, and we have workshops in the garden. Just last week we had a workshop on how you cook olives, and we're having one in 2 weeks' time on sourdough. So there's all these things going on as well. But we get grants and aid, and not grants and aid, grants, and our budget is well over between $5,000 and $10,000, so it's quite a big thing, and everyone knows it's a church, but it's run by the community. But the church has a big input on it because the community gardens pays for our water bill because they use a lot of water, of course, and we pay for half their electricity. Being right in the centre of town, we've had a few problems with things disappearing, and so we've got security lights and things on the top of the pergola. And since we put those up, a lot of the pieces of copper and that sort of thing have stopped disappearing. We think it's only, probably children, but it's annoying when you come down to water the gardens and you find the hose is gone or something like that. But everyone knows we're there because people walk from the hospital down to the main street and they walk past the community garden. And so there's a lot of people walking through, and every time I go down there, there's always someone around, and often they're picking things, and nearly everyone is willing to contribute, donate to cover the costs. And any surplus food goes to the local food bowl for the community. So it's, but if anyone's interested in community gardens, come down on a Thursday morning and 10 o'clock, you get a good cup of tea and cakes and things. The ladies cook all this stuff. And we have a community night once a month. We go out and have the members of the committee or anyone that members of the garden, and we go to a local restaurant or something like that. And the other alternate months, we always have something on in the gardens itself or in our church hall. So it's very closely, although it's a community thing, it's closely integrated with the church. So we've got the church, the community gardens and the hall, and the hall has the local theatre group. And we also run disability classes for cooking for people with disability to learn to cook, and they're run in the hall as well. So the whole place is, as someone has said, it's the busiest place in Corowa because all these things are going on. And it's because the church has allowed these community organisations to use our property. And,
That's fantastic, David. Thank you for sharing that. Another wonderful example of the community garden and church connection. Someone sent me an article once about one of the purposes of the community garden, saying that in our society today, people have quite often people's lives consist of a work aspect and a home aspect, and there's this third space that often is missing in people's lives. Us in the church, the third space is our church community quite often, and sometimes we have lots of other third spaces, but there are many people in our general society who do not have that third space. They have work and their home. I have many examples of people I know like that. So something like a community garden and all the setups that David was explaining there create that third space community connection that often people are craving for, and they will find it in somewhere like a community garden in whatever way that they can get involved in that.
Yeah, we find there are people coming along they're not gardens, but they just come for the company. And Thursday morning or Tuesday morning, they just come for a cup of tea, to time to talk. And we see that as part of our MOU is to integrate the community into the church under the cover of the church.
Beats daytime television.
Sorry?
It beats daytime television.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Doesn't take much to beat that.
It's very interesting just hearing you talk about the leveraging of other ideas that, you know, David's talked about how, you know, it does link in with those sort of cooking and skills and just all those other possibilities and connections. And I think what we both got there is terrific. And I suppose one of the things I wanted to pick up on that Tanya, you'd said earlier, was the sense of initiative, and it's there for you too, Tim, I think, of where it's. I was reflecting on last week's sermon on with Philip, and Philip sort of finding the Ethiopian eunuch, and this sense of he didn't ask anyone's permission to do it. There was no church council or hierarchy that said, "Go, Philip," but it's okay to, you know, baptize a eunuch or a whatever. And I think that leading of the Spirit and personal initiative is such an important thing for us as a church, aside from the whole eco-theology stuff of our future. And I think more power to both of you for, you know, seeing something that can be done and doing it without. And the other thing, I suppose, is that often we get held back with thinking it's a money problem, and really often it's an ideas problem.
It's not a money problem.
Not a money problem.
No, but often we say we haven't got the money, and I think that they're the two things that I'd throw out for a broader lesson for me.
I think it's like in our church, we've got a few, I call myself younger, but anyway, that have realised, and the whole congregation actually it realises that, you know, we need to reach out, that you can't just sit there and wait for people to come. You've got to look for ways to, you know, not attract people, that's the wrong word, but to have like things like community gardens that foster connections, and and then just make natural friends of the community, I guess, you know. So I think too long we've certainly just sat in our church and said, oh yes, well, you know, one day when the church closes, I started to say, well, let's say we say the church is not going to close, and how do we go about reaching out to community and making sure that we don't close? And community gardens certainly is, Viewshone's fantastic idea.
So here's my other. Oh, sorry, was someone?
Just said thank you.
Oh, echoing. Here's my other little bit of inspiration. A friend of mine who's sort of involved in the community garden but not really a church person, she found this grant. So I better tell you about this grant now. It's a Vic Health grant for $50,000, the full amount that we could apply for. And so she's got behind. I had this little inkling of an idea, and I told her about it, and she ran with it. And so the idea is to set up a kids' kitchen garden cooking program connected to the community garden, and held within the church buildings. Some significant renovations need to be done of the kitchen, but that's the funding. You can apply for the funding for that to employ someone to run these programs, coordinate these cooking programs as an after-school activity for kids in the community that are really looking at or who are missing that little bit in their education, to create some of those life skills that they can take home and take to the future. So that's where we're wanting to put that money in. Fingers crossed if we get it. So that's another way. And just by telling a few people that in the church that we have applied for this grant, we've already had several people say, well, I'd like to help grow some veggies to contribute to that program, and I'd like to come along and volunteer when you have the cooking and things like that. So there's already creating more and more interest from inside the church and outside the church to have another form of connection. So I'm excited about that.
Thank you. And of course, there's lots of nice bits of theology that link to seeds and small beginnings and conversations there as well, I'm sure. Look, that's our hour. So thank you very much, Tanya and Tim. and David as well. Perhaps you better send us some photos, David, of, so we can put up and post as well as part of this.
All welcome to come down and have a look at it.
Come down, come up.
Well worth a visit.
Come up.
Yeah,
I could ask, where's Corowa?
that's right. Long way away.
No, Tim, don't worry. It's
Not
in
in this state. Not in this state. Anyway, look, thank you very much. That was really stimulating and exciting. And yeah, look forward to hearing more stories about how it evolves, and hopefully you get your grant, Tanya.
Yeah, blessings on it.
All right.
Thank you,
Well,
Brian.
thank you.
Yeah.
And tomorrow night we have Mark
Mark.
Lernzak
Benzak.
talking about how to be a green church, and that should be a very good presentation as well. So I hope many of you can join us for that. And God's blessing upon us, and as you reflect on aspects, and hopefully we can use the word eco-theology with greater confidence ourselves when we talk about this in the future. But again, the creation, the connection, and I suppose Tim's point that it's also about us and the healing and effect it has on us being involved with the soil and growing and being part of things. So yeah, thank
It's
you.
going to be part of my belonging to Axedale.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right,
My apologies for tomorrow night, Brian.
Yeah, mine too.
that's all right.
Mine too, Brian.
That's all right. That's one of the beauties of our Zoom things, that we can, it's not an all or nothing thing we're committing to. So that's great.
Yeah, we can always watch back.
Yeah.
Catch up later. Yeah,
I'll be on another Zoom. Yeah.
likewise.
Me too.
Where are you, Rosalind?
I'm in Broadford, which is near between Kilmore and Seymour
Yes,
on the
I know where
Hume.
it is.
The
How
far
about
end
you?
of the presbytery.
Yeah.
Pardon?
The far end of the presbytery
Yes.
down
Yeah.
the highway.
Yeah,
Mm.
I'm probably the vocal one of Broadford. We were pretty quiet till I came along.
Yeah, it's lovely to see someone from Broadford. We used to talk about and wonder what is going on, but that's great.
Oh, well, we had a lot of bad luck. Our minister, Anne Blackwell, she died of cancer in just 12 weeks. And then our next minister, or our next preacher, she died of cancer in about the same time. So we were floundering around for a while as far as preachers go. But no, we're all right. We're fine. We're okay. We keep our head up above water. I've got a few sort of my age, and yeah, we're out there. So we'll keep.
That's good. All the best then.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.